Today's video is going to focus on the service and potential repair of a Shakespeare Wondereel number 1810. And this one looks like your typical spincast reel, but if you notice, there's no button. And if you hold it the way you would normally hold a spincast reel, you notice that the writing is upside down. So this one is actually a reel that is basically an underspin, and to release the line you turn backwards on the crank handle. So it'd be essentially a clockwise backwards turn, which lowers the line pickup pin in the spinner head to release the line, and then to get that pickup pin to engage again, you wind forward. So this is an under rod, basically very similar to a spinning reel, in that it's not just a spin cast reel that's upside down on the rod, but the spool, if you take this lid off, this cap, the spool oscillates. And here's another issue in terms of getting the cap off, especially if it's farm fresh and it's all gummed up. You have to, because this pickup pin isn't operating properly, but if you pull back on that, it's supposed to drop this pickup pin down, and it's not, because it's all gummed up. So you have to take and let's see if you can get this thing to work here. Oh yeah, you gotta go backwards. It's disengaged it, but it hasn't pushed down, so they have to get in there and bring that forward in the notch and down, because it's all gummed up, and then you can get the lid off. But at any rate, you'll notice that when you wind this thing, that it oscillates up and down to distribute the line in much the same way that a spinning reel does. And this, too bad, these are really pretty reels. This kind of brushed aluminum or stainless steel or whatever, probably stainless steel maybe. It's too bad it's got a lot of quote-unquote boat rash on it, and it's got some dents and things. So I will clean that up and maybe try to pop out to the extent that I can some of those dents. But another neat thing about this reel, again, you gotta kind of push that down manually because it's all gummed up. Gotta push that pickup pin down. Is that the drag? So when you put on the cap, yeah, you twist it to a certain extent to put on the cap, screw on the cap, but as you keep going, you're creating drag. So the cap is part of the drag system, and so there's a lip inside the cap here that presses down on the spool, creating friction and thus drag. The thing with this one, though, is I believe there's supposed to be a felt insert that goes around that lip to create the friction on the spool there. The other thing that's a little bit concerning about this reel, again, I like to buy farm fresh stuff, cheap, no more than $10, usually $5, sometimes $3, that are all mucked up and not working right. That's what I love. I like to bring them back to my life of my own. And most of them, I've never had one where there were bad gears or the gear teeth were broken or anything like that. But on this one, and I don't know if you can hear, but if you listen carefully, it sounds like I'm getting to a point in the gear where there might be missing teeth or it's skipping. So when that handle comes on the downstroke, you'll hear it. And you can feel it. It almost feels like teeth are missing or it's skipping. So that might be an issue. Or there might be a repair involved in this, not just a not just a cleaning and servicing. So I'm going to go ahead and take off the side plate here. Okay, so lots of not terribly dry, but gunky grease. Now let's see if we can see what's going on with these gears in here. Now if I examine that pinion gear, I don't see any major issues there. I see a lot of gum in the main gear there, but I don't see any missing teeth there. But as I go around, right here is about where it gets hard and almost like there's missing teeth. And then as I move down here, you notice this is oscillate up, so the main gear is engaged with the teeth on the lower end of this pinion gear now. That moves fine. But as I get around and this oscillates down and the main gear teeth engage with the teeth at the upper portion of this pinion gear, that's where it starts skipping and not sounding right. But there's no issue with the teeth. So what I think is happening is that something might be bent in here. The shaft or something might be bent, because I think when you get around to that end of it, it's riding, the pinion gear is riding higher at that point than it is, so it might be angled like that. It might be angled upwards. But it's definitely grinding there, and it's not an issue of missing or worn teeth, but maybe there's a bend in that pinion gear shaft or something. So I've never been into one of these, and so I'm gonna see, we'll take this apart and see what's going on. Lots of old dried up grease in there, which is why this thing, notice when I push that in, it I don't know if there may not even be a spring in there. It may be based on some kind of a cam or something, but it's real sticky. That we can get fixed up. There's the spool. And what have we got there? I don't know what this plastic-like flange here is. That's kind of odd. This is some kind of like a thin plastic flange around the edge of that spool. But I'm going to get as I always do, get this old line off there, and we'll be back in a snap. Okay, so we got the line off the spool. That can go in the parts tray. Looks like there's a felt washer and then a copper or brass washer. And I believe this thing is pressed into the actual body or frame. Now the question is, how do we get the shaft out of there? I think what's going to have to happen is you're going to have to get this main gear off of there by removing the other side plate. And you always hope when you're opening these things up that no springs or anything come flying out. But, so now that that is out, I'm hoping that this thing, there's got to be something. Oh, there's some kind of a, I think an E clip or a C clip on here, and I think if I can get that off, there it is, then this slides off, hopefully. Is there enough room to get it off? And that comes off, and then you can slide that out and take off the pinion gear, remembering that side, I assume that's a little washer. I'm gonna just leave that the way it is for now so I can get that back in the correct way. And wow, is that ever dirty. This isn't quite as complicated as I thought it was going to be, which is a good thing. But essentially all the parts are off of everything, off the body and everything else. So, well, we got to get this part here yet. This is an area where you want to be a little careful too with regard to springs, depending on how that anti-reverse works. Wow, look at all of that nasty, look at that nasty grease, look at that. I am not messing with that spring. I'm just going to put WD-40 in there and get that all cleaned up. I'm not going to take off this anti-reverse switch. I just don't see any need to. So I'm going to put that in the parts box. All caked on grease around there. But that appears to be all one piece. So that's ready for the parts. Well, I think everything's ready for the parts box and ready to be cleaned. So off to the sink, and I'll be back in just like that. And just like that, all the parts are clean. Now I examined this shaft, and there may be a slight bend in that, like kind of going that way. And I think that's why the gears aren't working, or that the gears are missing when it gets to a certain point. So I'm going to try to straighten that out the best I can and see what happens. I think this might be screwed in here, this part here, and I wanted to unscrew that and take this out on the vise and roll it on the flat top of the vise and maybe hammer it straight, but that wasn't coming out easy, and I don't want to break that off in there. Okay, well, that was interesting. So I took that main shaft out to my drill press. Of course, I had all of this gear and doohickey here removed, and I inserted the narrow end of the shaft into the drill press so that I could spin the drill press and see the extent to which the shaft was bent. And then I was able to turn it very slowly and slowly find where there may have been a bend, straighten it a little bit, turn the drill press back on until the shaft was spinning very smoothly without wobble, indicating that most of the bend had been taken care of. That helped a little bit, but it was still having an issue when you would get to the high point of that rotation on there. And you can see it's working nicely now. And what I figured out is that there needed to be a shim or something to push the main gear up into the pinion gear to make better contact. And as I was thinking about that, I recalled this piece right here. That is some kind of a tensioner to put pressure on the main gear to push it up to make good contact with the teeth on the pinion gear. And that was, I basically bent that way up to give it maximum tension. And then I reassembled it, and this is what I got. It's working perfectly now. No grinding, no missing. So I don't know what fixed it. I suspect it was a combination of both, because things did improve a little bit with the straightening of that shaft, and there was in fact a small bend in it. And then with the combination of that and tightening up that tensioner spring, that fixed it. So now we can complete lubing and putting this back together and buttoning it up. Okay, so let's start reassembling, and we'll start with oiling the main shaft here, and that includes down here, and then we're going to feed that through there, and then we have to feed the gear and that little brass washer. Oh, feed that through the gear and through that brass washer, and make sure that gear sets all the way down. And then this goes in with the narrow side facing towards the pinion gear. And then we've got to get that little C-clip on the tip of that shaft. And I'm going to need my needle nose pliers for that. And hopefully this lubing will quiet it down a little bit. Of course, part of that is probably the anti-reverse lever, just, you know, as it spins around, there's a spring on that, and so that makes a little bit of noise. That's probably most of the sound. I probably should have put a little grease on that gear back there, and that would have gotten rid of some of that. But and quite frankly, there ought to be some grease in here. I'm just going to put a little bit of oil down in that journal there and see how that, oh yeah, now it's moving much better. Okay, I'm happy with that. All right, let's get the side plate on. There's also a tensioner here to put upward tension on the spool, and I bent that up a little bit to increase that tension on there. And I'm going to oil this. Mechanism that runs the line pickup. I'll work that in there. You can't see it with the cap on, but you really need the cap on to create drag. I think you could see it a little bit there a second ago, but you can now feel when you go back on that handle, you can feel that line pickup retracting and re-engaging when you go forward. So this is working really nicely now. And so is the anti-reverse. It's a nice anti-reverse. It's almost like immediate. There's no delay in that anti-reverse. Pretty much every position. So that's working great. So the only thing now that needs to be done to complete this project, and I'll probably not put it in this video, but I need to either a piece of felt or a piece of that gasket material, just enough to create some friction between that lip and the spool. And then I need to pound out that dent there, and I'm going to probably do that yet as part of this video, but I'll leave the the felt part for some. I'll leave that out of the video. That's no big deal. Okay, so I went out into the workshop and pressed out that the dent and some other dents the best as I could. Never going to get it perfect because once it's dented, the metal's been stretched and it doesn't want to go back exactly the way it was. But I'm happy with that. That is a beautiful, beautiful reel, and it reminds me a lot of an old. Quite frankly, it reminds me of an old streamlined steam locomotive. The back end sort of reminds me. There's a vintage tractor called the Friday tractor, really fast, kind of an orchard tractor that had a nose on it like that. But that's just a pretty reel. That's a pretty reel, ready to go fishing again. All right, thanks for watching. See you next time.